The chow yard at Fort Valor burned under the desert sun, the kind of heat that stripped men down to pride and temper. Amid the laughter and clatter of trays, one woman stood silent. Sergeant Claire Dalton, sleeves rolled high, a small sparrow tattoo glinting on her arm. That's all it took. A few soldiers laughed. One sneered, "You gonna flutter at the enemy, sweetheart?" The whole line joined in. She didn't move, didn't blink. But her silence wasn't weakness. It was warning. Because before sunset, those same men would watch that quiet woman do something no one at Fort Valor would ever forget. And the story of that little sparrow would haunt them for the rest of their lives. If you believe that silence can be stronger than anger, that some soldiers fight wars no one ever sees, then hit that like button, drop a comment for every unseen warrior you know, and subscribe so you never miss stories that show what real courage looks like. The chow yard at Fort Valor baked under a ruthless sun. Heat shimmered off truck hoods, and the air was thick with sand and sweat. Soldiers lined up for food, grumbling about the weather, the rations, the boredom. Among them stood Sergeant Claire Dalton, calm, straight-backed, her tray steady in her hands. Her sleeves were rolled just high enough for the small sparrow tattoo on her forearm to catch the light. That's all it took. A few infantrymen behind her noticed. One leaned forward, voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Cute bird, Sergeant," he mocked. "You gonna flutter at the enemy?" Laughter followed, harsh and echoing across the yard. Claire didn't turn around, didn't blink, didn't even shift her stance. But those who watched closely, really closely, saw her grip tighten just slightly on the tray. That small, quiet movement was the first crack in the illusion, because no one at Fort Valor knew who she really was. Days at the base passed like clockwork. Drills, reports, endless repetition. Claire's world was logistics. Clipboards, manifests, equipment counts. The kind of work nobody noticed until it went wrong. Her desk was always immaculate, her paperwork perfect, her uniform flawless. She spoke only when needed, smiled rarely, and never joined in the jokes that filled the barracks at night. To most of the infantry, she wasn't a real soldier, just another supply sergeant, someone who made sure their gear showed up on time while they handled the real work. She let them think that it was easier that way. But every now and then, something in her eyes broke through the calm. Once a private saw her staring out across the airfield as helicopters lifted into the orange dawn. Her expression wasn't longing, it was memory. And when he looked again, she was gone. Back to her desk, the sparrow tattoo hidden beneath the sleeve. They thought she was quiet because she was soft, but silence can be armor. In the chow hall that week, the teasing got worse. One evening, as Claire balanced her tray, a soldier brushed past too close. The tray slipped, plates clattering across the tile. The hall burst into laughter. Someone clapped mockingly. "Nice reflexes, Dalton. Bet the enemy's terrified." She knelt down, gathering the pieces in silence. No curse words, no anger, just steady, deliberate movements. A medic stepped forward to help, but she shook her head, firm, final. Then she stood, left the mess behind, and sat at the corner table alone. That became her routine. Quiet meals, quiet exits. But that night, as she left, someone followed her with their eyes. A visiting SEAL operator, part of a small detachment running joint exercises on the base. He didn't laugh. He didn't join the jokes. He just watched. And when his gaze landed on the sparrow tattoo, something in his face changed. Recognition. But he said nothing. Not yet. The next afternoon, the sun beat down on the motor pool. A lieutenant made a surprise inspection, the kind that turned calm into chaos. Soldiers scrambled to clean gear, wipe oil, line up weapons. Claire stood at her desk, clipboard ready. The lieutenant stopped in front of her. "You," he said, picking up an M4 carbine from the rack. "You're logistics, right? Let's see what you actually know." The men nearby exchanged smirks. Everyone knew she wasn't combat trained. This was a setup. Claire didn't argue. She simply stepped forward, accepted the rifle with calm hands, and then, to everyone's shock, reached into her pocket and pulled out a strip of cloth. Without a word, she tied it over her eyes. The laughter stopped. Only the clicking of metal filled the air. Bolt, firing pin, Extractor. Piece by piece, her hands moved with surgical precision. No hesitation. No wasted motion. Within minutes, the weapon lay completely disassembled on the table. The lieutenant stood frozen. Claire removed the blindfold, blinked once, and began putting it back together. Faster this time, each part sliding into place with an ease that came from muscle memory, not manuals. The last click echoed through the motor pool like a gunshot. She slid the rifle back toward him. "It's all in the manual, sir," she said softly. No one spoke. Even the air seemed to hold its breath, because they all knew that wasn't something you learned from a book. That night, whispers replaced laughter. "Did you see what she did? She took it apart blindfolded. No way, she's just logistics." For the first time, the soldiers at Fort Valor looked at Claire Dalton differently, not as a joke, not as background noise, but as a question no one could answer. And somewhere in the shadows of the base, the SEAL commander from that visiting unit, Commander Logan Reeves, replayed the moment in his mind. He remembered another desert, years ago, a night when a coded transmission had saved his team from certain death, and the voice on the radio that night had called herself Sparrow. He hadn't heard that name since, until now. By morning, the base felt different. The soldiers still talked, still joked, but when Claire passed, their voices dropped. Some nodded out of habit, others out of guilt. No one laughed. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did. But she'd learned long ago that silence was its own kind of power. Still, one thing had changed. When she walked through the yard that day, the SEAL detachment stood near their convoy. Hardened men, their faces unreadable. As she passed, Commander Reeves turned his head. For the briefest second, his eyes locked on the tattoo on her forearm. He stopped walking. The men behind him froze too. Their boots halted in sync, their posture straightening, a formation without a word. Claire noticed the stillness, looked up from her clipboard, and met the commander's stare. Recognition flickered, brief but unmistakable. Then quietly, he lifted his hand in a crisp salute. Every soldier in the yard went silent. The sound of trays, engines, and laughter vanished into nothing. A single question hung in the air. Why was a SEAL commander saluting a supply sergeant? And in that moment, Fort Valor changed forever. Because from that salute onward, everyone knew Sergeant Claire Dalton wasn't who they thought she was. She wasn't just a clerk. She was the ghost of something buried deep, something that was about to come roaring back to life. For hours after it happened, no one dared speak above a whisper. The salute, that impossible, unexplainable salute, still hung in the air like a ghost. Commander Logan Reeves, leader of one of the Navy's most elite SEAL units, had walked right up to a logistics sergeant and saluted her like she outranked him, then left without a word. By sunset, the rumors were wildfire. Some said she'd saved his life in combat. Others swore she was ex-special forces who'd gone dark years ago. A few claimed she wasn't even supposed to exist. But Sergeant Claire Dalton said nothing. She spent that evening alone in the records office, the last lights burning across the motor pool. The fan hummed softly, pushing around the desert dust. Her fingers hovered over a worn photo. Faces blurred, edges singed. She slid it back into the folder before anyone could see. Then from the doorway, a low voice broke the silence. "You're not who you say you are you?" She looked up. It was Corporal Mason Reed, one of the soldiers who had laughed at her in the chow line just days ago. His voice carried no mockery now, just unease. "I don't know what you think you saw," she said quietly. "I saw a SEAL commander salute you like you saved the damn world," he muttered. "And I saw the way you field stripped that rifle blindfolded. That's not paperwork training." Claire met his eyes for the first time. "Maybe you should stop asking questions you're not ready to hear the answers to." Mason hesitated, then stepped closer. "You're hiding something." Her tone hardened. "No, I'm protecting something." He opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of boots outside cut him off, voices urgent and sharp. The door swung open and Captain Voss, the officer in charge of the base, stepped in, flanked by 2 MPs. "Sergeant Dalton," he said flatly, "Commander Reeves has requested your presence." The convoy was waiting just beyond the gates, headlights piercing the dust. Reeves stood near the lead vehicle, arms crossed, jaw tight. When Claire approached, he gave a small nod to dismiss the MPs. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," he said. "I don't run from ghosts," she replied. He studied her for a long moment, the weight of memory thick between them. "You shouldn't have come back," he finally said. "Fort Valor isn't built for people like you anymore." "People like me?" she repeated. "You mean the ones who survived?" The commander exhaled, weary. "You could have stayed buried, Dalton. They erased your file for a reason." Her eyes narrowed. "You think I asked them to?" For a moment the soldier in him faltered, replaced by the man who remembered her. Not the quiet clerk she pretended to be, but the operative who once directed air support under fire, the one who cracked coded transmissions in under 60 seconds while mortars fell around her. "Operation Cold Haven," he said quietly. "We lost 11 men that night. You saved the rest. You gave us the coordinates that pulled us out of a kill box." Claire didn't answer. Her expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened around the folder she held. "You remember what happened after," she said finally. Reeves nodded grimly. The blackout, the silence. "They buried the entire mission under classified levels we'll never see." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And they buried me with it." The next day, the entire base felt like it was holding its breath. Everyone knew something was happening. No one knew what. In the command office, Reeves and Captain Voss stood over a file stamped "Restricted." Level 6, access only. Claire sat across from them, her uniform still marked with dust. Voss flipped through the pages, his voice sharp. "You've been living under a civilian logistics file for nearly 4 years. Why?" "Because it kept me out of their radar," she said. "Whose radar?" She hesitated, then met his eyes. "The same people who erased Operation Cold Haven from the books." Reeves stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, if Dalton says she's hiding from someone, I believe her." "You should too." Voss frowned. "You're asking me to trust a ghost story." Reeves's tone hardened. "No, I'm telling you a ghost built your base." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, the motor pool buzzed with tension. Soldiers moved slower, conversations quieter. Claire walked between rows of vehicles, clipboard in hand, as if everything was normal. But her senses were sharp, tracking shadows that didn't belong. A sound, faint, mechanical, caught her attention near the east fence line. She turned. A camera lens flashed red for half a second before vanishing. She froze. Someone was watching her. Without breaking stride, she crossed the yard, heading for the radio room. Inside, static filled the air. The background hum of frequencies that never slept. She adjusted the dials, her movements smooth, almost instinctive. "Come on," she whispered. A familiar channel clicked alive. A voice she hadn't heard in years came through, low and distorted. "Sparrow, they found you." The blood drained from her face. "Who is this?" she demanded. But the line went dead. 2 hours later, the power cut across half the base. Darkness swallowed the barracks, the mess hall, the radio tower. The alarms failed to trigger. Claire grabbed her flashlight and sprinted for the operations center. Reeves was already there, barking orders. "Backup generators offline. Communications down. Someone's inside the perimeter." He looked at her. "This isn't random, is it?" She shook her head. "No, it's a message." He studied her. "From who?" Her eyes flicked to the window, where the wind carried faint traces of smoke from the east fence. "From the ones who weren't supposed to know I was still alive." Outside, movement stirred in the shadows. Figures, faint and fast, crossing the boundary line. Reeves' hand went to his sidearm. Claire's voice was steady, too calm for the chaos. "Don't fire until we know who they are." The lights flickered once, then came back online. The floodlights illuminated the intruders, not enemies, but federal agents. Reeves blinked. "What the hell?" Claire's stomach dropped. She recognized the insignia immediately. Office of Internal Security, the same division that had shut her down years ago. The lead agent stepped forward, badge flashing in the light. "Sergeant Claire Dalton, you are to come with us." Reeves moved between them. "On whose authority?" The agent's tone was ice. "On the authority of a classified directive signed 4 years ago. She doesn't belong here." Claire's heart pounded, but her expression stayed calm. "You erased me once. You think I'll let you do it again?" The agent's gaze didn't waver. You don't have a choice this time. The room fell silent, the kind of silence before a storm. Reeves' voice was low but dangerous. You're not taking her anywhere until you explain why. The agent turned to him. Because she's not who you think she is. She's not Sergeant Dalton. She's Sparrow, the one who broke protocol, who disobeyed orders, who cost this country millions in black operations cleanup. Reeves stepped forward. You mean the one who saved my men? Claire's voice cut through the tension. Both can be true. The agent reached for his cuffs. Reeves drew his weapon. The air turned electric. Then from the radio behind them, static. A familiar signal tone, the same one from the night before. Claire's breath caught. It wasn't the agency. It wasn't Reeves. It was someone else. Someone who wasn't supposed to be alive. As the soldiers in the operations center watched, the radio crackled again. A voice came through. Faint, fractured, impossible. Sparrow, it's time to finish what we started. Reeves looked at her. Who is that? Claire's answer was barely a whisper. The reason I disappeared. The sound of sirens cut through the bass, echoing off concrete and metal. Floodlights snapped on across the perimeter. The next chapter of her secret life was already beginning. In Fort Valor, every man who had once mocked her, doubted her, or saluted her was about to see who Sergeant Claire Dalton really was. If this story shook you, if you believe that sometimes the quietest soldiers carry the loudest scars, then don't forget to subscribe, because what comes next will change everything they thought they knew about loyalty, truth, and the price of survival. The storm that started at Fort Valor didn't die overnight. By morning, the rumor mill had evolved from whispers to full-blown theories. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones, piecing together fragments of what they thought they knew. Some said Sergeant Claire Dalton had been taken by the feds. Others swore she'd vanished before they arrived. But the truth was far stranger. Claire hadn't left the base. She was underground, in a cold, windowless operations bunker, surrounded by screens, wires, and the low hum of encrypted transmissions. Across from her sat Commander Reeves, fatigue in his eyes but respect in his tone. They'll be coming back for you, he said quietly. That much I'm sure of. I know, she replied, but I'm not done yet. Her voice was calm, but her eyes carried the focus of someone who'd already accepted the cost of what she was about to do. She leaned forward, typing a string of commands into the terminal. The screen flickered. A map of the region appeared. Glowing red dots, transmission trails, and one label that froze Reeves in place. Cold Haven, active channel. That's impossible, he muttered. That op was buried years ago. It was, Claire said. But someone's dug it back up. Up on the surface, Captain Voss stormed through the command corridor. His jaw was tight, his voice low. Where the hell is Sergeant Dalton? He barked. An officer hesitated. Sir, she's with Commander Reeves. Secured location. Voss's eyes narrowed. You mean she's running her own operation? Outside, the desert wind picked up, kicking dust across the base, rattling loose metal, carrying the faint hum of engines that didn't belong to any registered convoy. Voss didn't know it yet, but something was approaching Fort Valor. Something connected to the coordinates that had reappeared on that map. Down in the bunker, the air was colder now. Claire sat in silence, watching the screens flash through surveillance feeds and transmission codes. Reeves stood beside her, tense but quiet. Finally, she spoke. Do you remember the drone strike that went wrong? She asked. He nodded. Yeah, the one they blamed on bad intel. Her gaze didn't move from the screen. It wasn't bad intel. It was intercepted intel. Someone fed the enemy our coordinates. Dozens of our men died because of it. Reeves frowned. You're saying that's what Cold Haven was really about? I'm saying the leak came from inside, she said. And whoever it was, they're still active. The lights flickered. Static hissed through the intercom. Then a voice. Low, distorted, too calm. Hello again, Sparrow. Reeves went rigid. Who is that? Claire's face drained of color. He was supposed to be dead, the voice continued. You should have stayed buried. You're opening files you don't understand. Claire's tone turned to steel. I understand enough to know that you're the reason those soldiers never came home. Laughter crackled through the speakers. Dark, hollow, familiar. You still think you're saving people, don't you? You're just making it easier for me to find you. Reeves slammed the comm switch. Trace it! Claire's fingers flew across the keyboard, running the coordinates through the base's signal triangulator. When the map loaded, Reeves' stomach dropped. The source was inside the base perimeter. Before he could react, the power cut again. Alarms wailed, emergency lights flared red. Reeves drew his sidearm, motioning Claire behind him. From somewhere above, they heard the heavy sound of a door slamming open. Then the rapid steps of boots echoing down the concrete stairwell. A shadow appeared at the top of the stairs. Don't shoot, a voice called. It's Mason. Corporal Mason Reed burst into the bunker, breathing hard. His uniform was streaked with dust and oil. They're saying the feds left the base an hour ago, he said. But the perimeter sensors just picked up inbound signatures. Not military. Civilian transports, multiple, moving fast. Reeves turned to Claire. They're coming for you. No, she said. They're coming for what I know. Mason looked between them, confused. What the hell does that mean? Claire opened the terminal again. It means someone wants to make sure the truth about Cold Haven dies with me. Reeves swore under his breath. We need to get you out of here. I'm not leaving, she said firmly. Not until this is finished. Above them, the base lights snapped back on. Floodlights bathed the compound in harsh white. Soldiers scrambled into defensive positions. Confusion thick in the air. Captain Voss stood on the control deck, staring at the convoy approaching from the east. Dust trails, headlights, black SUVs with no visible insignia. He grabbed the radio. Unmarked vehicles breaching East Gate. Repeat, unmarked vehicles inside perimeter. His words were cut off by the sound of gunfire. Single shots. Controlled. Professional. Down below, the comms crackled again. Reeves' jaw clenched. We've got contact. Multiple shooters. Claire stayed focused on the screen. Then we're running out of time. She pulled up a second data stream, encrypted files buried deep in the old Cold Haven archive. Lines of text scrolled past faster than the eye could follow. She stopped suddenly, freezing one line on the display. Found it, she whispered. Reeves stepped closer. What am I looking at? The name, she said softly. The one who sold us out. He read the name, and his blood ran cold. Voss? The truth hit like a blast wave. Captain Voss wasn't just in command of Fort Valor, he was the leak. He's been coordinating the intercept since the first Cold Haven op, Claire said. That's why the feds came early. He called them to make sure I disappeared before I could expose him. Reeves' fist clenched. We end this now. Before she could answer, the steel door above them exploded inward. Smoke, shouts, boots. Reeves tackled Claire to the floor as bullets ripped through the bunker glass. Mason dove behind a console, returning fire. Voices shouted from above. Target sighted. Secure the asset. Claire crawled to the terminal, typing one final command into the system. What are you doing? Reeves yelled. Sending it all, she said. Every file, every coordinate, every name. Straight to military command. The room shook as grenades detonated outside the entrance. Mason shouted, They're breaching! Reeves fired 3 rounds toward the stairwell. How much longer? 10 seconds, she said. Just 10 more. The transmission bar hit 100%. The system beeped. Data upload complete. Claire exhaled once and steady. It's done. Then the door gave way. Gunfire filled the room. Reeves went down, hit in the shoulder. Mason pulled him back behind cover, returning fire. Through the smoke, Captain Voss appeared. Body armor gleaming, weapon raised, eyes cold. You just destroyed everything, he snarled. No, Claire said, stepping forward unarmed. I just set it free. He aimed. You think anyone will believe you? I don't need them to, she said. The files will. For a long moment, the 2 soldiers stared at each other. One built on lies, the other standing in the truth she'd carried for years. Voss's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, a single shot rang out from behind him. He froze, then fell forward. Commander Reeves stood behind him, weapon smoking, arm trembling. He dropped the gun, his voice rough. That's for Cold Haven. Claire rushed to him, pressing her hand over his wound. You're bleeding, she said. He smiled faintly. So are you. Outside, sirens wailed. Reinforcements finally arriving. Lights flashing across the base. The feds stormed in, too late to stop what had already been set in motion. One of them shouted, "Who authorized this transmission?" Claire looked up, eyes calm, resolute. I did. As they escorted her out of the bunker, the dawn was breaking over Fort Valor. The first rays of light caught the dust in the air, painting it gold. Mason limped beside her, bandaged and pale. What now? He asked. Claire's gaze lifted toward the horizon. Now, she said softly, we see who answers the truth. But as the sirens faded and the medevac lifted off, one line of encrypted text blinked on the terminal screen, unseen by anyone. Sparrow transmission received. Stand by for phase 2. The story wasn't over. It was only evolving. The sun rose over Fort Valor, bleeding orange light through the haze of smoke and dust. The battle was over, or at least that's what everyone told themselves. The agents had cleared the compound. The wounded were being airlifted, and Captain Voss's body lay under a tarp near the comms tower. But Sergeant Claire Dalton didn't feel victorious. She sat on the back of an ambulance, her arm wrapped in bandages, staring at the empty horizon. Everything she'd run from, every secret she'd buried, was now out in the open. Commander Reeves approached, his arm in a sling. He stopped beside her, silent for a long time. They've confirmed it, he said finally. The files went public. Every hidden operation, every falsified report. It's all out now. You did it. Claire didn't look up. Did I? Or did I just paint a target on every name that tried to tell the truth? Reeves took a slow breath. You exposed the system that used you. That's more than most ever get to do. Her eyes lifted, tired but steady. And what happens to me now? He didn't answer. He didn't have to, because even though the base was secure again, the war for truth was far from over. By midday, Fort Valor was crawling with investigators. Trucks rolled in, carrying analysts, military police, and digital forensic teams. The air hummed with static and suspicion. Everyone was being questioned, except her. They didn't know what to do with Sparrow. She wasn't a suspect, but she wasn't innocent either. A young agent approached her with a clipboard. Ma'am, command wants to relocate you for debriefing. Claire looked up, eyes narrowing. Relocate or erase? The agent hesitated. I'm not cleared to answer that. She smiled faintly, a tired, knowing kind of smile. That's what I thought. Reeves stepped between them. She's not going anywhere until she gets medical clearance. The agent opened his mouth to argue, but one look from Reeves was enough to silence him. He left without another word. When the dust settled, Claire stood and faced Reeves. You know they'll make me disappear again. He nodded. Not if I can stop it. She shook her head. You can't fight ghosts with bullets, Commander. That night, Fort Valor was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after too much noise. Most of the soldiers had been sent to temporary housing while the base underwent review. Claire walked alone through the yard, the same one where she used to eat in silence, where they laughed at her tattoo, where everything had started. She stopped near the mess hall doors. The cracked tile where her tray had once fallen was still there. She knelt, brushing her fingers over it. Funny, she whispered, how they remember you only after you bleed for them. Behind her, a faint sound, the crunch of boots. Mason Reed stepped out of the shadows, his arm in a sling, face pale from the firefight. I thought you'd be gone by now, he said. So did I. He hesitated before speaking again. They're saying your files were sealed under Operation Sparrow, that you were intel. Is it true? She looked at him, expression unreadable. It's not who I was. It's what I became. Mason swallowed. I was one of the ones who mocked you. I'm sorry. Her tone was soft but final. Then don't waste the apology. Just remember what silence can cost. They stood there in the dim light, two soldiers bound by guilt and revelation, surrounded by ghosts that no one else could see. The following morning, an unmarked helicopter landed near the runway. The agents from internal security stepped out again, not in combat gear this time, but in black suits and unreadable faces. One of them walked toward her. Sergeant Dalton, he said, we're taking you to DC Command. They want to talk to you. Off record. Reeves stepped in, voice firm. She's not your prisoner. The agent's tone was ice. No, but she's not free either. Claire exhaled, then placed a hand on Reeves's shoulder. It's okay. Let me go. He looked at her, jaw tight. You sure? She nodded. If I don't face them, the truth dies before sunrise. The wind from the helicopter whipped through the yard, lifting dust and torn papers into the air. As she walked toward it, every soldier nearby turned to watch. The same soldiers who once mocked her, now standing in silent respect. One by one, they lifted their hands to salute. And for the second time in Fort Valor's history, the entire yard stood still for Sparrow. Inside the helicopter, the world blurred beneath her. Sand, wire, and light fading into nothing. The agent across from her said quietly, You didn't have to do it, you know. You could have stayed hidden. She looked out the window. If hiding means watching good men die in silence, then I'd rather be found. He didn't respond. Maybe he understood. Maybe he didn't. Halfway through the flight, her earpiece crackled. A faint tone only she could hear. Her eyes widened. It was the same encrypted channel. A familiar voice came through. Phase 2 confirmed. Your message reached command. You're not alone anymore. She smiled in the first real smile in years. For the first time since Cold Haven, she wasn't a ghost. She was a spark. When they landed, DC Command didn't look like a courtroom. It looked like a reunion of shadows. Men and women who weren't supposed to exist stood waiting. Reeves was there too somehow, his uniform neat despite the sling. He met her halfway across the hangar. They reinstated you, he said softly. Special Operations Liaison. They want you to finish what you started. Her breath caught. You mean Operation Sparrow, he said. Official, authorized. This time, they're not burying it. She stared at him for a long moment, then at the insignia patch he handed her. A black sparrow, wings spread, embroidered over a red horizon. The same mark that had once been a curse was now her banner. She pressed it to her palm. Then let's finish it right. As the two walked toward the briefing room, the sun broke through the windows, lighting the walls in soft gold. The war was over, but her mission, the mission to protect truth, was just beginning again. And for everyone who ever stayed silent, for every soldier dismissed or mocked for not fitting the mold, her story became a quiet reminder. Strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, sometimes it bleeds, and sometimes it flies. If this story moved you, if you believe that true warriors aren't always the loudest, then please, subscribe. Because stories like this deserve to live. Because Sparrow's courage isn't fiction. It's a reflection of every unsung fighter who carried pain with pride and duty with silence. So don't just watch. Be part of it. Like, comment, share, and remember, heroes don't always march in formation. Sometimes they stand alone.